Abby McDonald. Welcome to the Compare To podcast.
Thank you, Heather. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this new book of yours
I'm
because
excited too.
it has my brain going 1,000 different directions. So let me just apologize to viewers and listeners in advance because, I just want to go all the places all at once with this concept. But you wrote a book on surrendering certainty.
Yes.
Whoa, what a title! Right? Because I'm doing this whole I'm exploring this whole concept around it's easy for us to have big faith.
Yeah.
We're going to heaven forever. We're going to spend eternity with Jesus forever. I've got big faith that the God I never saw sent Jesus to the earth. I've got big faith for all of that. And when it comes to can I show up at a women's meeting wearing the wrong thing? Oh, I'm pretty insecure around that, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many things in this life,
Mhm.
right? Where we're trying to follow a formula, almost
Yes.
like our faith formula, right?
hmm
And really faith isn't formulaic, right? We're on a sanctification journey, but we've made it so okay, I got the God and Jesus answers. Check. Now eternity is secure. Now what can I do here on earth where I can check, and then this outcome will happen?
hmm
And we're just gonna practice that. It's kind of what you're saying in your new book. So tell me what
Yes.
inspired this for you, my friend.
Absolutely, Heather. Well, what inspired this book was conversations that just kept coming up with friends and community, family members. And the question that I kept hearing over and over is, how do I know that this is God's voice? This nudge that I'm feeling, this prompting, this burning that I feel in my soul. How do I know that this is God that is leading me toward whatever it is, XYZ, or if it's just my own desire, my own voice or imagination? And I knew that struggle because I have lived that struggle. I have been that person, like you said, who wants the formula. God, just tell me what to do. Give me a black and white sign with bells and whistles on it, and all will be good.
Right.
But God does not work that way. Sometimes He gives us those big signs, and I have had those moments in my life. But more often than not, what I'm finding is it's those gentle nudges, and it's more in hindsight that I see His mercy and His leading. And it's after I take that step of faith and I trust what I already know of His
Mm,
character. And so I thought, you know what, there's something here. There's
mm,
something that needs to be explored, and we need to dig in and go deep. And so the book explores three truths from John 10 that Jesus speaks to the Pharisees. And they are, my sheep hear my voice.
mm,
They will come and go and find pasture, and no one will snatch them out of my hand.
mm,
And I invite the readers to make those truths her foundation rather than this longing for security and something that honestly will never bring us the security that we long for.
yeah.
So that's it in a nutshell, and
Yeah. Oh,
that's
it's so
what led
good.
me right. Yeah,
So good. So I was raised in a Christian home. I went to
yeah,
Christian
me
schools.
too.
I went to Christian
Mhm.
college, Christian graduate school. And when I was 24 years old, I felt like God was calling me out of graduate school into my first job running a congressional campaign. Okay.
Mm,
And so I knew God had opened that door for me. I knew God, this was my passion was I wanted to run a campaign. And so I moved sight unseen to Abilene, Texas from Virginia. Grew up East Coast girl. I know you're on the East Coast, grew up there. But I'm going to Abilene, Texas. I'm going to run this campaign. And then the way it was supposed to work was we were supposed to win the election. And then he was going to go back to Washington. And then I was going to be his chief of staff. And I was going to have this escalating political career from there.
yeah.
And we lost the race. We
Mm,
lost the election. And it was a crisis of faith for me as a 24-year-old because I
Yeah.
was like, how did God call me into a position and we not win? Especially the other side, like straight up cheated. They called all the senior citizens and they told them a lie about what my candidate was going to do. Like they straight up cheated. They lied. Like evil one was kind of how I felt.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then I spent 11 months of my life in Abilene, Texas, which is like a growing and thriving place now. 20 years ago, 25 years ago was not quite the same.
Right.
And I really struggled. I was like, God, how
Hmm.
could you do this to me?
Right.
Like, like because God told me to take that next step, I kind of had a theology that believed like the whole rest of the way was going to be paved in the way
Hmm.
I expected it to be paved.
Yeah.
And so that's just like kind of my story of wrestling with certainty. But
Yes.
I feel like this is common for every woman,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
expect that, okay, God's showing me this next step. And maybe it's, I mean, maybe it's like the person to marry,
Hmm.
right? Like I
Sure.
married him and then like, God, like how did we end up here?
Hmm.
Why is our marriage failing? Or, like I took this, I moved to this place, right? Like what what kind of things are you speaking to in that realm, Abby?
Yeah, Heather. Well, I'm glad you asked because that is one of the things that I talk about in the book is a lot of times we take those steps of faith and we are certain it's God. We know because I think on some level we know when God is asking us to do something. We may try to reason our way out of it, but when we walk with him long enough, we know when he's asking us to do something. And I've taken those big steps of faith too, where I'm like, God, this doesn't look anything like I thought it would. And what is even happening? And it's so funny that you tell that story because I did almost the exact same thing. And the circumstances were very different. I was not running for political office. But I moved here actually sight unseen. I had never been to Cumberland, Maryland, never visited, never didn't know anything about it. And my husband applied for this job here, and it was a good opportunity. It was an increase in pay. We would be closer to our family, which at the time, when he applied for the job, we lived in Utah, which was over 2,000 miles away from any family. We had no family there, but we were thriving. We went to a great church. We were really plugged into our community. We had a 2-year-old son, and things were going well. But when you're raising a family, you want them to be close to their grandparents. You want them to have that relationship. And this opportunity became available, and we prayed and we felt sure that God was leading us toward this, right? And so, honestly, the first time I saw this town, and I say this with every bit of love, but we were driving over this overpass on Highway 68 or Interstate 68 and driving over Cumberland. And this is not the best view, I'll just go ahead and say, that you can have of this town. But I thought, oh my God, what have I done?
Mhm.
And I just was like, what am I doing, God? I don't, I can't move here. Well, we had
Mhm.
already made the commitment to move here, so we
Mhm.
did. But when we got here, I had the hardest time finding friends, finding
Mhm.
community. We tried to find a church for years, tried different churches, and nothing felt like it was a good fit. And I went through a season of loneliness and depression. And I honestly thought we had made the biggest mistake of our
Mhm.
lives moving here. I can look back now and I can see all the ways that God was moving through that. Like I said before, sometimes it's in hindsight that we see his mercy, but God used that season to really draw me in deeper,
Mhm.
and make me rely on him as my source of sustenance and my identity more than all these other things, being active in the church, which that's great. I'm not saying don't be active in the church, but community. He wanted me to go deeper with him in that season.
Yeah.
And when I came out of it on the other side, I was stronger. I My faith had grown in ways that I never anticipated. And so, yeah, I think that sometimes when we take those big steps, we do have certain expectations of ways that it's going to play out, and that's normal.
Yeah.
But we have to hold those expectations loosely, and we have to let God work in ways that we didn't necessarily anticipate.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me like we're just really quick, or I'm just really quick, I'll personalize it, to be like, okay, God, help me make the decision. And then it's like, okay, check. He helped me make the decision. And then immediately I take my faith from like faith in God to like, no, I had faith in the plan.
Yeah,
like, like,
exactly.
okay, no, God, you gave me the plan, and now I have faith
Hmm.
as trusting in the plan, right? I mean, I guess it's almost like the Israelites,
Hmm.
like they cross
Yeah.
the Red Sea, and then
Hmm.
immediately the plan doesn't look like they thought it was going to look, and they lose
Right.
their faith in God because the plan is not what they expected.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a tricky area for
Hmm.
us.
Yeah.
Hearing the shepherd's voice, right? Like you say something in the book about telling the difference between, I think, fear and discernment. Will you talk about that a little bit?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And so, uh, this obviously is something that that I've wrestled with. Everything in the book is things that I've wrestled with before, and something that I just kept hearing come up in conversations. But I think a lot of times when we reason our way out of something that God has called us to do, we tell ourselves, "Well, I'm using discernment. I'm being wise, and I'm using spiritual discernment." Where really it's just fear.
Mm,
It's fear of the unknown. It's fear of looking foolish. Fear of what people are going to think. Am I going to be successful at whatever it is, and whatever success looks like, or we think that it is? And so one of the things that I talk about is I grew up in a Baptist church, very fundamental beliefs, very conservative. And so when I grew up, I thought, you know what? Why do I need to go to a Baptist church? I'm going to try other denominations. I'm going to go to Assembly of God, or I'm going to go to Pentecostal. And what I found was that they practice things that were very different than what I grew up in, the churches I grew up on. There were altar calls in the service. There were people laying hands on each other. There were people speaking in tongues and all these things that I had never been exposed to before. And a lot of times, my natural response when I saw these things was fear because I did not understand it.
mm,
I didn't understand what was happening. And then sometimes I was like, that person is just, you know, trying to draw attention to themselves.
mm.
And I'm just being completely honest. And uh, yes, sometimes that is the case. I'll just be blunt there. But I think that the fact that something makes us uncomfortable does not mean that it's untrue.
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of times we believe that because we're uncomfortable, that we need to run the other direction, or it's not of God, or it is untrue. And that is absolutely not the case.
Yeah.
And as I have been more open to that discomfort and what God can do in those moments, I have found that there is so much there that is just good, and it's filled with joy, and it causes me to do things that I did not think I was capable of
Mhm.
doing. And in the book, one of those moments, and this was back several years ago, actually 8 years ago when my daughter was just a baby. But I came forward during one of those altar call moments, and it wasn't the first time I had gone forward during one of those, but this was a moment where the woman stood up there and I felt like she was just talking directly to me. I mean, everything that she said, I felt like that's me.
Mhm.
That's me.
Mhm.
That's me. And of course, I tried to reason my way out of it as we often do. And I was actually operating the media that day.
You had a good
I
excuse
was
not to go
doing this.
forward.
I was doing the slides, and so I was like, do I go forward, or is this person sitting next to me going to be okay? Are they going to be capable of doing it? Well, we weren't really doing any slides or anything at that moment anyway, because this service was unlike
Mhm.
anything I'd ever seen. And it really just turned into a house of prayer.
Mm.
That's what it was. It was the epitome of where Jesus says, "My house will be a house of prayer."
Mm.
And so I went forward, and there was all these other people standing there that who had already gone forward, and I felt really exposed. I felt kind of foolish and awkward standing there because the person who had made the altar call was blocked by all these people who were already standing there. And I was like, do I go back to my seat? Do I keep standing there? And I just closed my eyes and I'm just praying as much as I can because my mind is going a million different directions. And then I open my eyes just a little bit and I see this hand reaching through the people
Mm.
toward me. And
Mm.
she pulled me in
Mm.
and she just started praying over me and naming fears and burdens that I had been carrying for so long that
Mm.
I had not told anybody
Mm.
about. And that was just a pivotal moment for me
Mm.
because I thought, you know what, all these times that I have sat in my seat and questioned
Mm.
and made judgments, and God used that moment to release me from this depression and this
Mm.
anxiety that I had been carrying around for so long. And I'm not saying that everything was just hunky dory and just rainbows and butterflies after that,
Yeah.
but I definitely felt a weight that had
Mm.
been lifted
Yeah.
after that. And so, yeah, that's one of the stories that I tell in the fear versus discernment chapter. And just, be open.
Mhm.
Be open to what God can do when we just let Him break down those walls.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you said a couple, like, really important things that I think totally apply to this audience,
Hmm.
because we talk about that. So I have got a 40-day body image workbook, and I take women on a 40-day journey through that workbook, and, this comes up all the time. Just this reality that, for those of us that live in the United States,
Hmm.
we most of us have the ability to make sure that our lives are always comfortable,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
and so
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
discomfort, it's like, how do I make it
Hmm.
go away?
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, "Oh, I've got an earache. I'm gonna go get some drops."
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
"Oh, my bunion's flaring up. I'm gonna get a brace." Like physical or whatever, like, "Oh, there's this creak in our door." Like, "Oh, we're gonna get some WD-40." Like, we've got a way to fix every discomfort. And so being uncomfortable is a
Hmm.
really strange sensation, I think,
Yeah.
for many of
Yeah.
us.
Hmm.
And for women with, like, eating disorder history, body image issues, like, a lot of us learned, like, the way to fix those uncomfortable feelings is you fix your body. Because if you
Right.
just look different, then you don't feel uncomfortable anymore. Like, everything
Yeah.
around you can be chaos, but, if you could just lose a couple pounds, woo, then you feel good and you won't have this discomfort feeling anymore. And I think the reality of, like you said, like it's discomfort, but a lot of times it's fear, right? Like
Mhm.
naming that fear. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm uncomfortable in this group. Okay, that's one way to say it, but is the reality that, no, I'm actually afraid. Like that
Mhm.
people in this group, because they don't look like me, they might reject me, right?
Yeah.
Or because they, have better degrees than I do, or better jobs than I do, or better kids than I do, or whatever. Or maybe they're all married and I'm single. Like we have these fears. And I think it's so important to name those as fears.
Mm. Yeah.
Right. And then,
Mhm.
and then be like, oh, it's the fear that's making me uncomfortable. And that's a completely different scenario. Right. Because
Mhm.
um yeah, yeah, I love that. I love thinking about, fear versus discernment, and I think we've all done
Yeah.
that too, right? Like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. I'm sure it's the Lord telling me not to do that."
Right, right. Well, and another thing, Heather, is that fear is a natural emotion that God
Mhm.
created us to feel. And so, my point in the book is not to say, don't fear, because that's just unrealistic.
Right,
But let your fear propel you toward Jesus instead of
right,
away from him,
right,
and come to him with that fear and just be honest. If you're afraid, then tell him about it. He is more than capable of handling those big emotions.
right.
And that's one of the things that I love about the Psalms is David was just completely honest before the
Mhm.
Lord, and he just let it all out.
Right,
And I found that so encouraging when reading those. And it's a good reminder to me that I don't have to hide and I don't have to run away when I'm afraid, but I can just be honest with him. And a lot of times that can help me to shift my perspective and say, okay, God is in this.
mm,
God is here and he's leading
right,
me. And it may not look the way I think it needs to look, but he's still with me
right.
and he's not going to forsake me in this.
Yeah, that's good. I think God is big enough for us to say, "Hey, I'm afraid here." Like, "This scares
Yeah.
me, because yeah, you're
Yeah.
right, David said it.
Hmm.
Like, "Hey, my
Hmm.
enemies are all around me. God,
Hmm.
remember me? Hello,
Yeah.
over here. Like, this is not
Right.
looking good." Right? So
Hmm.
I love that reminder too. So as I was thinking about this concept of surrendering certainty and, just I'm flipping here because I think you worded it well and I can't find it right now. So I'm just going to keep talking. Um,
Okay.
the what is it? Ooh, okay. I remember now. The danger of too many opinions.
Ooh. Yeah.
Ooh, so this one was like nail on the head
Mm,
because, so thinking about my audience again,
mhm.
right? Like all the time, it's like, oh, actually, I just got an email the other day. Like, Heather, like your opinion is this. And then I Googled it and I got 27 other opinions. Like, how do I know that
Yeah.
you're right? And I'm like,
Right.
you can't know that I'm right. Like, you just need to
Mhm.
read your Bible. Like, God's right. It's not that I'm right versus them. It's like, just read what God has to say. Like, where
Yeah.
do you go with that in the book?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I feel like this is so prevalent in our day and age, like you said. I mean, we have never had access to more information and more gurus on every topic under the sun. And the problem is that, like you said, that we run into conflicting opinions, and one person tells us to do one thing, and another person tells us to do something completely different. And so, one of the analogies that I talk about is years ago, I saw this Pandora commercial, and it was right around Mother's Day. And it was these kids were placed in this big room. It looked like a warehouse or something, and they were blindfolded. And then their mothers were put on the other side of the room, and there were probably about 8 kids in this video. And they spun them around a few times and then they released them out to go and find their mothers on the
I
other side of
remember
this
this.
big room. Yeah,
I remember
yeah.
this
And
now. Yep.
every single one of these kids found their mother
Mm,
without sight, without seeing them. They used their sense of touch, perhaps their sense of smell, the way their mother's belly felt, their hair or whatever. And it was just so touching. And as I thought about that commercial, I thought, if those kids were in a room where there were thousands of people shouting,
mm,
would they have been able to find their mom?
mm,
Now, they weren't using their sense of sound to
mhm,
find their mother, but I think probably not. They probably wouldn't have been able to find them because it would have been too chaotic. There would have
mhm,
been too much distraction. And I think a lot of times we feel like we're going to be able to connect with God and hear from God on a personal level when we have thousands of other voices screaming for our attention and speaking into our lives. And not only that, but we go to those other voices first
mhm,
before we go to our living God.
mhm,
And I have been guilty of this.
mhm,
I mean, like I said, it's never been easier for us to just jump online and Google search or whatever. But what I have found, the more I walk with God, the more I have found that when I go to Him first, before I go to anyone else, I am able to hear His voice better. I'm able to discern His leading more over the voices of the world. And I'm not saying don't ever go to anybody else or seek
sure,
other wisdom.
sure.
We need those people in our lives to speak wisdom and to speak life into us, but I'm not necessarily going to go to those other people first.
Right.
I'm going to go to God first. And we see this example repeated in scripture. I mean, David, who I was talking about earlier, one thing I noticed about him as I was studying for this book is whenever he was going into battle and he was about to encounter this huge army where they were outnumbered or whatever, he would always go to the Lord first and he would say, should I battle whoever it was? And God would give him the okay. And he would say, yes, you're going to be successful. You're going to conquer this other country and against other people. And he was. And he
Mhm,
every time he did that, he was successful. And so I think that we have to be very intentional and we have to be aware of the effect that these other voices have on us because we have never lived during a time where we have been exposed to more information, like I said, but we're more prone to anxiety and depression than ever before.
right.
And we see this in our kids,
Mhm,
we see this in just the people around us, and that should say something, you
yeah.
know. Like more information is not always a good thing.
No, no, it's not. And also, I mean, just to kind of blend in the concept of the title of your book, right? The surrendering certainty concept.
Hmm.
It becomes harder to not believe that there is certainty,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because
Hmm.
so just thinking about like the realm of women I work with, right? Like all of the
Hmm.
diets
Yeah.
through the decades have promised us a certain outcome, right?
Hmm.
So in 1995, when I wasn't eating avocados and was only eating plain bagels and fat free frozen yogurt because fat would make you fat, like the certainty I was offered was if you eat this way, you will have this kind of body. And then in
Yeah.
2015, the exact opposite, right? The certainty
Hmm.
was just whatever you do, eat only fat. And I'm trying to figure out how to make a fat bomb in my kitchen with coconut oil and nuts and all kinds of other kind of gross things to eat only fat because I couldn't get enough fat in one day, right? And it's like but the certainty again, like all of these promises of culture, be it around diet or health, right? Like if
Hmm.
you eat exactly this way, you'll never get a disease. No, I'm sorry. I talk to women all the time that ate exactly that way and they still ended up with the disease, right? Like there's
Yeah.
there's this promise that this equals this outcome. And I think, as you were talking, I was just thinking about the reality of like now artificial intelligence, right? We don't even get
Oh
to
man.
Google search anymore. We just get an AI answer. And
Hmm.
I'm doing a series. I just did a series through the month of May. So last month on the show, I did a series where it was me versus ChatGPT, where I would answer
Mm.
a question in ChatGPT and then I'd see what ChatGPT answered.
Oh wow.
It was eerie.
Yeah.
ChatGPT does a pretty dang good job. And it actually
Yeah.
like affirms you and it's like, I'm sorry you're feeling this way. Thank you for being so vulnerable with me. Would you like any additional resource? I mean, it's like super personal. But but to your point, right? Like we have the God of the universe accessible to us through prayer.
Yeah.
And yet it's so easy just typing into chat. It's so
Hmm.
easy just typing into Google. And I
Yeah.
mean, I'm so guilty of that too. Like, kid has an issue. Oh, why is my kid struggling with da 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 da? Like, and here's the 17 things to do. Okay, let's work through the list instead of like, okay, Lord, help me. I don't know how to help with
Yeah.
this. So
Yeah.
that's good stuff. Well, Abby, what message would you just like to encourage women with today? Like what's the takeaway? I think they should all go get your new book, Surrendering Certainty, Hearing God Today by Letting Go of Tomorrow. I mean, we got a whole listenership of women who would not call themselves control freaks necessarily, but we're smidge controlling. So
Mm.
surrendering certainty and letting go of tomorrow is really hard. Encourage us with something as we close today, Abby.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, one of the things I talk about, Heather, and what I would encourage listeners with today is that when we try to run outside of the knowledge that God gives us for today,
Mm,
His whatever He tells us today, we take on a yoke that we were never intended to carry.
mm,
We live in finite bodies. Yes, our spirit will live eternally, but our bodies and our minds are finite. But God is infinite.
mm,
So he can carry all that knowledge. He can carry the future, but we can't. And when we try to run outside of today, in this moment, then we get ahead of ourselves and we cannot enjoy that peace that God wants to give us. And so I want to invite listeners to trade that heavy yoke for his yoke because he tells us in Matthew that his yoke is easy and his burden is light.
mm,
Now, that doesn't mean our lives are going to be easy
mm.
and light, but his peace for today and what he gives us for today is what we need. And it is easy and it is light, and he is with us in it. And so that's the encouragement that I would give
So good.
listeners, and just know that he is for you and he wants you
Yeah,
to flourish.
that is so good. Because if I could actually wake up in the morning and just think about, okay, what does God have for me today? What is my challenge for today? Like what do I need? What needs to happen today? If I
Hmm.
could actually stay focused on today, like my husband and I had a joking conversation yesterday where I accused him of worrying ahead. And he was like, but you worry ahead all the time. I'm like, yeah. And that's how I can spot someone else worrying ahead. So,
Yeah.
but it's so true. We just steal so much of our joy and peace and rest with
Yeah.
worrying ahead and
Hmm.
forgetting that he is good. He will lead us. And my body, my spirit can only hold what he gives me for today. So that's a good
Hmm.
word, Abby. Abby, tell everyone where they can connect with you. I know this book, Surrendering Certainty, is available everywhere Christian books are sold, probably everywhere books are
Yeah.
sold too. Where can they connect with you?
If they head on over to abbymcdonald.org, they can sign up for email updates and get a 5-day free challenge called 5 Days to Unstuck. And it's addressing common areas where we get stuck in our mindsets and areas where we can't seem to find breakthrough. And so that's the free gift that you can get when
Love
you
it.
sign up.
Love
Yeah.
it. Sounds super helpful. Well, Abby McDonald, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Heather.
And thank you for watching or listening today. I hope something today has helped you stop comparing and start living. Bye bye.